Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Ambitious, Awakened, and Aligned. I'm your host, Laurie Hawkins, and today I get to share a conversation that I think will shift the way that you think about leadership, frustration, and impact. My guest is Andrew Oxley. He's a nationally recognized author, speaker, and executive coach with over 30 years of experience helping leaders cut through the complexity and drive measurable results. As the founder of the Oxley Group, Andrew has worked with some of the most respected organizations in the world, from Coca-Cola to CNN to Progressive Insurance, always bringing his clear, results focused approach. What's most inspiring about Andrew is how his own pivot from chasing outward success to discovering deeper meaning fueled his mission to help leaders reclaim their time, sharpen their focus, and lead with clarity. That's deeply aligned to the conversations we love to have around here. Today, we're diving into one of his most powerful frameworks, the four faces of frustration, how to turn frustration into delight. You'll learn why frustration isn't something that we should avoid, but a signal that can guide leaders toward loyalty, engagement, and truly extraordinary results. This is a conversation that will empower you to see challenges differently, not as barriers like we always have in the past, but as opportunities for transformation. We are all about the transformation. Let's jump in with Andrew. Welcome to the show, Andrew. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me, Laurie. Excited to be chatting with you.
Yeah, I was marveling at your bookshelf, and I'm in awe of all the inspiration behind you. So we'll continue to kind of add to that. But what I'm really curious about, let's just dive right into. You began your career in technical sales in Toronto, in Canada. Although I just found out you're now living in the U.S. And yet, I feel we kinda grew up in business in the same era where it was drive, drive, drive.
Yeah.
I also come from a technical sales background, get the results, what have you done for me lately? And yet there was a single quote that changed the trajectory of your life. So I'd love you to share that story with our listeners and how it shaped your mission today.
Yeah, I actually, it, I actually had a degree in mechanical engineering, which I always say uniquely qualifies me for executive coaching, which is a nice way to think that it's, not really any qualification whatsoever. But, uh, but, but at the same time, in my final year of engineering school, I had a business professor at the University of Western Ontario. His name was Professor Jack Lemon, and he invited me to stay after class, which was never a good sign for me. I was sort of in the third of the class that made the top two-thirds possible. And so he invited me to stay after. He said, "Mr. Oxley, I've been reviewing your transcript." And I was like, "Oh, wonderful." He said, "You're not exactly at the top of your engineering class." And I was like, "No, I'm not." And he's like, "You're, however, at the top of this class." And he said, "It occurs to me you should not be an engineer after you graduate." And I was like, "Well, that's somewhat problematic since I'm in my fourth year." And he's like, "You should go sell something technical." And I didn't even know you could do that. I didn't know that was a thing. So I started looking into this, ended up getting a job selling commercial air conditioning for Train Air Conditioning in Toronto. Um, Ended up leading a highly successful sales team there, had some amazing mentors there. And I, I, had early commercial success. I like to say it enabled me to have my midlife crisis early.
Mm.
And so at the ripe age of about 26, I had a great lifestyle, but no life. And I woke up one morning and picked up the Globe and Mail. And in the bottom right-hand corner, I don't know if they still do, but they had this thing called Your Morning Smile. And it was supposed to get your day off with a bounce in your step. And this particular morning, the morning smile was, "The problem with the rat race is even if you win, you're still a rat." And I remember shaving that morning thinking, I'm just going to be a big fat rat. That's all I'm going to be. I'm going to be a big fat rat. Now, I did something really important, and this is something that I'm going to come back to in a minute. I actually didn't know what to do about that, but I took that quote and I actually I didn't have a laminator, so I took sellotape and I put it on both sides and I stuck it in my wallet. And every time I opened my wallet, I saw that quote and I was like, how do I change my life? How do I don't want to not be successful. I want to be successful, but I want to feel like I'm contributing something more than just like chasing on a rock and rolling it up the hill and it rolls back down, rolling back up again. And so I kept asking that question. It took me 2 years to figure out that uh, an answer. Now, the answer I figured out was actually the wrong answer, but it's okay because it got me to where I am today. I thought the problem was the job. And the problem with quitting your job to fix yourself is that you take your biggest problem with you. And I did. I took my biggest problem with me. Luckily, I chose this occupation, so I have spent literally the last 30 plus years trying to figure out the answer to the question and trying to figure out models that help other leaders find a life of significance and purpose beyond just monetary success. Uh, I think sometimes what people do is they face this choice. It's either I'm going to have monetary success or I'm going to do what I love and live a life of purpose. And it's a false choice, but it feels like it's a choice we're forced into by the world. And so I had some early mentors. Bob Proctor, actually out of Toronto, was an early mentor of mine. I had the pleasure of bringing him to Atlanta, gosh, I think half a dozen times to work with people. And he challenged me and laughed at me, and he passed on, of course, last year. But he was not the kinder, gentler mentor, but he was a significant influence in my life. So that quote set me on a uh, on a different trajectory. And I just want to end that story with this, Laurie, for your listeners. It's the questions you don't have the answers to that are the ones that will propel you forward in your life, not the questions you have the answers to. So when I put that sellotape on that and I didn't know the answer, but I just kept asking the question. And the problem is that we get seduced by focusing on what we do know the answers to, and we get busy with what we know, and we just put those questions off to the side and we forget about them. And I would just challenge you, if you're listening to this right now, what's one question you don't know the answer to?
Mm,
That you could just write down and say, the reality is someone knows. You're not walking down a path that nobody's ever walked down. Somebody knows the answer to that question. In fact, the challenge quite often is people come and ask us questions, and the answers are usually so simple.
mm,
We want a complex answer because complex is attractive because then I'm absolved of the fact that I haven't done it yet. But the changes you need to make are not usually so remarkable in substance. It's that it's hard to do them over and over and over again. And that is where the magic happens.
mm. So many profound nuggets there. And I really want to encourage our listeners to pause for a moment. And even if you're driving in your car, pull over and send yourself an email or a text. What is that question that you've been grappling with that you don't have the answer to? And you know what struck me so much about the beginning of that story? You were 26 years old
Yeah.
and you went on a quest to
Yeah.
find the answers. And in that quest, you've been able to have such a deep impact because you finding, or maybe not even always finding the answer, but you going through the journey of that, when you put a hand back and encourage people to follow along, you may be just a couple of steps ahead throughout that process, and you're able to show that. I love that we grew up with the gurus like Bob Proctor, and Brian Tracy was my mentor, and, the that we were so it was a time where that was so powerful, and yet today, I think it's less about the guru and more about just like, "Let me show you I've walked the journey, and I'll walk it with you. I'm just a little further ahead on it."
Yeah.
And I have a few, 20 somethings, are my children right now, and they're asking those questions. And
Yeah.
it's interesting, like right in that moment, I was asking them too when I was at their age, and you forget sort of what's the journey from there to here as I'm watching them grapple with these questions. So I think even our young listeners are really going to stop in their tracks with that. So thank you for like really going deep into that. Let's go back to the these things can coexist is what I would say. And still, even though we're telling people they can coexist, we have this deeply rooted non-belief that success and fulfillment can coexist. So what are you notice I mean, you've coached thousands of leaders at this point. What do you see as driving that misconception that these can't, and how do you sort of help guide them to the place where they do believe that?
Yeah, and yeah, so I think where I would start with is that going back to the question is like, what is your biggest frustration right now? Personally, professionally? Maybe it's your marriage, maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a spouse or sorry, a sibling or something. Maybe it's somebody at work, maybe it's that your people aren't motivated. What's your biggest frustration? That becomes the question, right? So now maybe it's this question, like, how do I have a life of purpose and a life of significance and a life of true success at work? How do I do that? Now, the problem we get into is that we don't ask a how question, we ask a why question. Like, why are my people not motivated? Why is my boss so unreasonable? Why is there so much to do? Why can't I get through my inbox? And the problem with a why question is you'll always get an answer, but it will keep you exactly where you are because my boss is unreasonable, because there's too much going on, because it's, blah, 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 blah. You'll get an answer, but it will keep you stuck exactly where you are. When you ask a how question, you're like, how do I change that?
Mm.
I don't know. That's why you have to write it down. Well, who does know? Like, the example I often give of this is that wisdom is wasted unless you know what the question is you're asking. So if Warren, um, uh, oh, who's the famous
Warren Buffett?
Warren Buffett. I don't know why
Yes.
that was. I want to say Warren Beatty, and that was not the point I was trying to make. If Warren Buffett walked in the room right now, I'd be like, Warren Buffett, that's so amazing. He's like the most successful investor of all time. And you know what? I wouldn't know what to ask him because
Mhm.
I haven't thought about that. Like, I'd say, like, how'd you do it? And he'd be like, well, I talk about this all the time. It's not it- so you have to know the question to ask. There's this piece of new age philosophy, which I do not ascribe to, but it is that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Well, I actually believe the teacher is always there. The problem is that since we're not asking the right question, we don't know who to ask. So if Warren Buffett walked in the room right now, he's got all the wisdom in the world, but I don't know how to extract that from him because I don't know what questions to ask. Getting clarity on the question is the first step that you have to have in order to live a life of significance, live a life of purpose, and balance the things in your life. Now, it'll never really be in balance. This idea of balance is a bit of a myth, because balanced people don't actually change the world. But that doesn't mean I don't aren't making choices. Like, I might choose to work really hard in this particular season. Another season I may not be working quite as hard.
Mhm. Mhm.
But seasons have beginnings and endings to them.
Mhm.
So if your methodology to success is to work your butt off constantly, that's not a season. That's a lifestyle you've chosen.
Mhm.
So what we say to people is, look, working hard is critically important to a point. I
Mhm.
think we've sold young people a bill of goods that they don't have to work hard. They can just, work smarter. Well, work hard first, because you'll be amazed how smart you're going to get
Mhm.
as you work hard.
Mhm.
But there'll come a point of diminishing returns. And so we call this the ceiling of complexity. It's when you say those words that you've said and I've said, it's I have no more time. And
Mhm.
that's when you know that you have to change, not the job, not the boss. I have to do things differently because the ceiling of complexity is actually self-created. We create it through our skills, behaviors, values, and beliefs. And I know this because when you work with large geographically diverse organizations, people run out of time at different levels of productivity doing the same job. So it has to be self-created. It
Mhm.
can't arbitrarily exist. So when you run out of time, there's something you have to change, a skill you have to adopt, a belief you need to change, a process you need to work on, a behavior that either you need to stop or start, but it's something you need to do differently. And so the beautiful thing about this is somebody who's walked a little ahead of you can look and say, well, the problem is, and you're like, "Ah, no, that's not the problem. The problem is," and we want to assign the problem ourselves, but we can't have that level of clarity quite often.
Mm.
Other people can give us that level of clarity, if we'll just accept what I call the hard truth rather than the cold comfort of validation from people.
Mm. How do you encourage organizations to get to the hard truth?
Yeah, well, first of all, we encourage leaders to start with themselves.
Yes.
Um, there's this image of leadership that leaders are like Bruce Willis who can take down a high rise with a paperclip, right? And that's not the person we want to follow. Like I want to follow someone who's human, who has faults, who um, admits when they make mistakes. And
Mhm.
so, if that's how we'd want to follow, why would anyone following us want to follow the guy with the paperclip? We want to follow someone who's real.
Mhm.
They do too. So
Mhm.
start with yourself. And even if you don't have, it may not be problems you have today, but share it with your team, the problems you've experienced as you've gone through your career
Mhm.
and the struggles you had. That vulnerability creates relationship with people and it encourages other people to be vulnerable as well.
Mhm.
So, so it starts with that. It starts with awareness. And it's the hardest thing. It is the hardest thing for people to be aware where they need to get better.
Mhm.
Um, and so, but if you're going to be emotionally intelligent, you have to start there. You have to start with where do I need to improve? Now, most of us are blessed with someone in our life who will be honest with us. I'm married to her. Um, and I say that with full respect and honor. She is amazing, and she has the ability sometimes to ask me questions, and I'm like embarrassed I didn't even think of it. I'm like, but
Mhm.
or did you notice what you did here? And I'm like, I didn't. I could become defensive. And when
Mhm.
you become defensive, all learning ceases. Like, so I can't defend why I'm right and learn from a person. Now, being open to learning means that I don't have the right to defend. Now, it doesn't mean I have to accept their feedback, but I'm not going to argue with them. I'm going to try to understand where they're coming from.
Mhm.
So I would just challenge leaders to start with yourself first.
Mhm.
Be the example of what you want in other people, and then encourage people. And when people make mistakes, celebrate it. Don't not the same mistake over and over again. If you're an accountant and you don't know how to count, don't celebrate that. But but celebrate the things that clearly there's a learning that could have been
Mhm.
extracted from.
Mhm. Yeah, so powerful. Thank you, Andrew. I want to now dive into your book. So you mentioned the word frustration. You have the four faces of frustration. I feel like we're at a time that there's an amplification of frustration. So I'd actually asked you before we started the podcast when you wrote the book, and I would love to so it's been a while, and
Yeah.
yet I see this amplification of frustration, and so, tell us about the book. What are the 4 faces? Why do they matter for the leaders listening in organizations today? And then beyond that, I'll ask you part 2, which is what are you noticing in frustration in organizations today? But let's dive into the 4 faces first.
Yeah, yeah. So I actually did read the book a little while back, and um, what I was finding was that leaders were having difficulty connecting with the people that they were seeking to lead. Their frustrations would play out all over their face. Or I would notice sometimes that leader was frustrating people in their organization, or they were frustrating entire groups of people. And I'd be like, why can they not see it? And part of the reason we don't recognize frustration in others is because they don't react the way we do when we're frustrated.
Mm,
Now, I want to distinguish between anger and frustration. Everybody looks basically the same when they're angry, but 3 of the 4 sort of responses to frustration transition from anger into what we call frustration. One of them just stays looking angry. And so you all probably know somebody like that in your life, that they get frustrated and they look angry and they stay there. And they're always angry, it seems like. They're angry about it's not moving fast enough, it's not happening fast enough, why did you do that wrong? And in their defense, they're not really angry. Well, sometimes they are, but they're passionate. They're passionate about anything they care about. And we call these people reds. And the face we use for them is the angry face. And the problem with this is for leaders, many of you are reds. You are driven. You want to be in charge. You love being in charge. And you just annoy the piss out of people. And it's interesting because it's what drives your success, but it's what undermines your success at times too. And so one of the things when we're coaching people is we're trying to get them to distinguish between the behaviors that they are successful because of and the behaviors they're successful in spite of. And so what can help you be successful to a point becomes an in spite of after a little bit. So that drive, that push, that desire to, it's never fast enough, it's never good enough. That's what drove your success. But if you're not careful, it undermines your success at some point. So we call them the reds or the angry face. Everything's got to happen fast. It may be wrong. It doesn't matter. We'll fix it. I may hurt people in the process of getting to the goal. Didn't mean to. Sorry about that. Don't know why you even care. Very driven individuals. High percentage of leaders because they want to be in charge. Reds do. All right, so staying with the very fast-moving people, we have the yellows, or what we call the optimists. These people have never met a problem they can't put lipstick on and talk about how great it is and what's good about that. They are they react to frustration. They look like a red for a little while, and then they start feeling bad that they got mad, and they start telling you it's going to be okay, and of course it's going to be good, and here's what's good about this, and they start using a lot of words to say very little, but it's incredibly optimistic. And it's almost like they confuse people. They don't know so is there a problem or isn't there a problem? Because I thought there was a problem, but now it seems like there's not a problem and it's going to be good. So there's a lack of clarity with these individuals quite often. With reds, there's clarity. They just burn a lot of relationships quite often. But with yellows, they're so interested in preserving the relationship that they create a lack of clarity. So very optimistic individuals. And then you move. By the way, yellows are more people-oriented than reds. Reds are more task-oriented, get to the top of the hill. Yellows are like, can we get to the top of the hill, but have some fun along the way and, enjoy ourselves. Staying with the people orientation, we have what we call greens, and greens are non-emotional when they're frustrated. So this is very difficult for the other behavioral styles. By the way, it's the largest behavioral style on the planet. They're incredibly loyal. So the longer an employee has been with you, the more likely it is that they are a green, and non-emotional when they're frustrated. So when you frustrate them, they get quiet and they stop talking, which is interpreted by the other behavioral styles as acquiescence, as I'm fine with what's happening. They are not fine with what's happening. If they were fine, they'd be talking. When they're not talking, it means they're not fine. So complete misread quite often of the situation. And so, and by the way, if anyone's ever said to you after the fact, well, I knew that wasn't going to work, they are probably agreeing. Because you will say to them, well, why didn't you tell me? And they're like, I tried, but you wouldn't listen. Because they make suggestions rather than giving edicts like reds do, right?
They're not bold.
Yeah, they're not bold. They're very, very loyal. They're very caring people. They don't like conflict, so they'll just back away and do whatever you ask them to do. That doesn't mean they're bought in. And so they're just the face for them that we have is the face with no emotion. Like so if that's a green. And then last one is the what we call the blues, or these are the individuals who ask tons of questions. When they get frustrated, they say like, well, what about this? What about this? And they get branded pessimists because they can't see, you're always talking about why it won't work. Well, like they consider themselves actually the anchor of reality. Like they've got to keep the world anchored. Like, okay, wonderful that you think that's going to work, but let's talk about how. And so when they get frustrated, they ask tons of questions. So the four faces are the angry face, the optimistic face, the no emotion face, and the worried face, essentially, where they start asking tons of questions.
And so how do you guide organizations to understand this? Because it has a massive impact on I'm thinking about culturally, about relationships at the executive level and beyond. So how do you get people to see that in themselves?
Yeah, so we go back to the self-awareness piece, like, do you know what face you are? So when I first started studying this, someone said to me, they said, Oxley, what's it like to be on the other side of you?
Mm,
And being somewhat yellow, I said, well, it's wonderful. And they said, I know you think so. I'm
mm,
like, wait, it's not? He said, not always, right? It's hard to see ourselves from another perspective. And so
mhm,
how do you come across when you're frustrated? And do
mm,
you know when you're frustrated? But early in my career, I knew I was frustrated, I guess. I just didn't know anybody else knew. Um, and so I thought I was warm and fuzzy, like just sort of a kind person until one day somebody told me that I was being a complete ass.
mm,
And I was like, what? And I didn't understand how it was coming across. So the first thing is you got to know you,
mhm,
and then you got to understand other people, right? So how 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 am I frustrating people? You
mhm,
know, how do I how do people respond? So frustration is a signal that there's something going wrong in the relationship.
mhm.
Now, depending on how much rapport you have in the relationship, maybe a small blip or it could be terminal. But it's a warning sign. It is a withdrawal from that emotional bank account, that rapport bank you have with another person. And it's either a big one or a small one. And depending on how the relationship, it could be a big deal. So recognizing that when I push too hard with certain individuals, it damages the relationship. When I don't listen to them, um, like, if you don't listen to a red, they don't care. They'll just keep talking.
Yeah, I was
Um,
thinking they wouldn't have that emotional intelligence to recognize, right? So it would just be everything's fine, and if it's not, they would want to be met in the same way. Well, they
right.
probably wouldn't appreciate that either, but they want someone to speak up.
Yeah, well, they want someone like the biggest complaint you get from Reds is, "Why won't my team speak up when there's a problem?" And I'm like,
Right.
"Well, the mirror's right there,
Yes.
right? Maybe it's not them. Maybe it's the way you engage with them because when you challenge a red, reds are like awesome and they just want to have an argument and sort of slug it out and that's the way the best ideas win. That's
Mhm.
highly uncomfortable for about half the well, almost two-thirds of the population.
Mhm.
There's about 20% that's okay for, and reds love it. But uh, two-thirds of the population, that's a very uncomfortable place to deal with a red. So they want more dialogue and more just like can we just take the emotional intensity down? And so if the frustration you're experiencing with your team is a signal about what's going on.
Mm.
So if you're frustrated that your team's not engaging with you, the question becomes, like, so what is it that I'm doing that could be creating that? Now, the simple answer would be, well, they're just not motivated, they're not engaged, they don't want to. Well, that's simple because now I've assigned the blame to someone else. But the question is, I don't ever change another person um, by changing them. I change myself and expect, if I change that I'll get something different from them. And maybe I will, maybe I won't. But, I love Dr. Wayne Dwyer's quote. He said that the problem with thinking the rest of the world is the source of your problems is that you have to send the rest of the world to the psychiatrist for you to get better. Right. So it's never them. It's got to be me. Right.
Right.
It's got to be first.
That's a great quote. Uh, I'm thinking about I have, one of the organizations I work with is an accounting organization, and what I've always found fascinating because I come from sales organizations in the past and sales leadership, and in that type of environment, you have a lot of a similar type of personality, which would express frustration in a similar way, and then you go into an accounting firm, same thing, but different
Hmm.
expression of, and so I find a lot of them in frustration are
Yeah.
the
Quiet.
third one. Just don't say anything, don't ask any questions, go quiet, and so that's at the leadership level we've got a group of people in the same place. So what's a recommendation if you've had that experience when everyone has the same face of frustration?
Yeah, well, they're gonna get along swimmingly.
They
Uh,
do get along
yeah,
swimmingly, but the progression doesn't always happen.
yeah, and so, this is problematic when you work in an industry where it attracts a certain,
Yes.
behavioral style for per se, right? So,
Mhm.
in accounting, you're gonna have people who are probably a little bit more deliberate, careful, analytical. So you probably got some of the green blue or blue green thing going on there. Now here's the challenge they're gonna have is their clients are probably a bunch of entrepreneurs quite often who are not blue greens. They are probably red blues or red yellows. And so
Right.
one of the things when we work with accounting groups, we're like, okay, you got to understand your natural approach to this is going to really annoy your core constituencies that you're seeking to serve.
Right.
So what we challenge people to do is to incorporate into their leadership team people who are very different than them.
Mm.
Um, so, depending on the industry, in this case, if it's an accounting firm, you might need to go to try to find some people who are very different than you, and they will annoy the snot out of you at times. But they will provide a diversity of perspective that is important to you as you try to formulate strategy and look at how to serve your customers and your employee base.
Mhm. Which is even where we come in, right? Is that often we're brought into organizations where we're that different face of something, that different perspective and ability to sort of unpack things. So, as we're seeing a time where I think frustration has been heightened
Yeah.
within organizations, how are you seeing is it just amplifying the need for this work, or what are you noticing as some of the themes with leaders right now in alignment with this conversation?
Yeah, I like to say that COVID actually microwaved about 10 years of change into about 3 months.
I love how you said that.
Yeah, it just
Yeah.
now I don't know that I don't think that human beings have fundamentally changed at all. I think that what we're talking about probably not probably I've been working in this field was for 20 some years before COVID. So uh the best run companies always focused on connection
Yeah.
and creating an environment where people can thrive. Challenging environments, not environments that coddle people by any stretch of the imagination, but
Mhm,
challenging
mhm.
environments, right? I just think after COVID, it's so much more important because
Mm.
um, young people today, and I love it when people like my age say, young people today, I'm pretty sure, my parents said the same thing about my generation. Now, there are differences with the younger generation, without question.
Yes.
But
Mhm.
there's some really positive things. And the young people today, they're not motivated and they don't want to work hard. And what they really mean when they say that, I found, is like I worked hard and I put in my time and that's what you're supposed to do. And they want to know how this is going to benefit them. And I'm like, yeah, they do because they've watched the social contract be destroyed as they've gone through with other people and they worked hard and they played by the rules. So they're like, no, they got a shorter time frame, right? So you can I always say complaining about young people is like yelling at the wind. The wind doesn't change and you're exhausted. So, what young people are not going to change. Now, that doesn't mean everything that people bring to the workplace is helpful, necessary, or desirable, but it's our job to figure out how to extract that from them, how to help them understand how to play in an environment that they probably didn't get a lot of instruction on, right? So the
Mhm.
quality of your life is based on the quality of your relationships, and the quality of your relationships is based on the quality of the connection you have with people. So as leaders, this is so much more important today because young people are looking for a sense of purpose from the work that they do. They will work harder for a purpose than a paycheck.
Mhm.
This just scrambles the pattern of older workers. They're like, that doesn't make any sense. Why do they care? And I'm like, well, it's a beautiful thing because if you run a small organization, like when I say small, I mean not a multi-billion dollar multinational organization, it's so much easier to create a purpose that resonates with your people. This is the one area where scale works against big companies.
Mhm.
You can do it in a big company. We've done it in big companies, but it's so much harder. You can,
I agree.
in a smaller organization or the team you lead, what's the right that you want to, what's the wrong that you want to right? What's the thing that shouldn't be, that if you could find a way to fix it, that would really resonate with people? What are you trying to accomplish? And if you can connect people to that, and not frustrate them in the process, then you're going to have a very engaged, motivated workforce. And if you don't, they're going to move on somewhere else.
So powerful. I find it so interesting too, working with leaders and this whole dialogue around the frustration with our younger generation. I always say we raised them. Like we're actually the parents of this generation that we for some reason adore and love within our personal environments, and then we get into the workspace and choose to be frustrated with them, but we taught them that they should be driven by purpose and that they could create something unique for themselves where they felt whole and that they created fulfillment. We've started to teach them this lesson. I think that the challenge we're having is we still haven't learned it for ourselves. We're still on this little, what do you call that, tightrope of making fulfillment and success separate and apart. And so that's why these conversations are so important, because when our generation of leadership can truly get to a place where we deeply believe it and we know how to like bring that together, then we'll understand, I think, in a more powerful way how to work with the next generation in business. So, because they kind of have it figured out before us. They're saying yes to fulfillment and success, and they believe they can go hand in hand.
Yeah, and they're asking the question. Let's just go back to
They're
what we started
asking.
with, right? They're asking that question. They're not giving up on the question.
Yeah.
I think that just, years ago, I had a manager ask me, he was burned out, he was 40 something,
Mm,
and he said, "I'm just burned out. How do I recapture my passion?"
mm,
And I remember one of the great things about the work that, I do is I get asked questions all the time, and I'm like, "That's a really good question." So I gave him an answer, but even when I gave it to him, I thought that was not a great answer. But I really got
mm,
thinking about that, and I got thinking, "W- why, why do we lose our passion?"
mm,
And I've, there's many reasons, I'm sure, but one reason I think I have found is that we are passionate when we are growing. We are
mhm,
passionate when we're doing new things, when we're risking. And the older we get, the more comfortable we become. And the more comfortable we become, the more we don't want to risk. We don't
mhm,
want to do anything different.
mm,
When I ask people about the times they felt the most alive in their life, it was when they were in high school, when they were in college, when they were first married, when they were first house, first kids, youngs. When you go back to those times and you said, "Hey, is this an exciting time?" And you're like, "Oh my gosh, no, it's so busy. I've got so much going on." And so as we get older, we get comfortable. We've evened stuff out. And I would just challenge, if you're feeling a lack of passion, you know, go find something new. I'm not saying go, you have to leave your spouse. That's not what I'm suggesting. Go find something new, some hobby you can share with your spouse if you're married. Go find something where you can grow, where you can make yourself uncomfortable again.
mhm,
And you will find yourself feeling more alive and more passionate. And that passion will transfer to other areas of your life as well.
mhm. Oh, so powerful, Andrew. Tell me, so I kind of wanted to weave in just a little bit about AI because what I notice in organizations right now, again, is we've got this either or versus this and. And so I see this heightened level of frustration and I see this heightened level of excitement for possibility. So I'm curious right now, what are you excited about with the future of leadership, and how does AI weave into that?
Yeah, I think, AI is a great thought partner, not a great thought leader,
Mm,
right? So
love that perspective.
yeah, I
Agree.
think the
Yep.
the challenge I see, and I've started saying this more and more to leaders, is that leadership is mostly art and a little bit of science. And what
Mm,
AI brings to the leadership is the science, but the art is is going to be very hard for AI to capture because it's a human element,
mm,
right? So AI is a great way. to challenge your preconceived notions, to open up your mind to different possibilities, to automate, repetitive tasks. But it's a horrible way to try to build relationships with people.
Mhm.
So it is a great use. And so the way I would look at it is that with people, we should focus on effectiveness. With things, we should focus on efficiency. And I think that sometimes sometimes we try to be efficient with people. And that, I mean, just imagine arriving home at the end of the day and saying to your significant other as you walk through the door, I just want to make sure everything we do tonight is very efficient. I mean, nobody would ever say that, right? So why do we treat people at work like efficiency should be the objective? It should be effectiveness with people. We should be effective with people, efficient with things, effective with people. And so, so I think with AI, it's a great way to sort of blow the cobwebs out of your mind and look at things from different perspectives and look at a process for how do we do this. No, it's just going to be part of the picture. That's not the full picture. I've used AI to be what we call the challenger and challenge people's preconceived notions of things, especially if you've got somebody who's extremely closed-minded, which we all are to some degree. We just think we are. We just think we're open-minded. We're I joke with people sometimes, Laurie. I'll say to them, are you pretty open-minded? And they're all like, oh yeah, for sure. I'm like, are there things you're closed-minded about? I mean, morality and ethics aside. And they're like, well, I guess. I'm like, what are you closed-minded about? And they're like, well, things I already know I'm right. Wouldn't that define every closed-minded person on the face of the planet? They believe they're right. So how do you don't open someone's mind with a hammer, you open it with a chisel. So a great chisel is AI, because I could sit down with somebody and rather than telling them they're wrong, I say, listen, what's the problem we're dealing with? And let's use this AI model and let's postulate some different solutions and causes of what could be happening. And the AI model will show them very quickly that they're not seeing the complexity or the completeness of the problem. And I didn't have to tell them that.
Mm. Incredible. I was thinking back to something you said earlier in the podcast as well, that it's about the questions we ask. And so, no different than the questions we ask ourselves, the questions we ask others, the questions that we ask AI. It's only going to be a great thought leader based on
That's right.
the depth of our own questions. So, this has been such a powerful conversation. I'm so grateful for your time with us here, Andrew. I feel like we may have to do a 2.0 because I had so many other questions we didn't get to. But this was really powerful. I'm wondering, is there anything you want to leave our audience with?
Yeah, so just one thing. First of all, I'd like you to think about what's the number one question you have that you don't have the answer to. Write it down. Um, we do a free workshop once a month for leaders who want to sort of sketch out where they are and where they want to be. We call it the leadership framework workshop, where we help them to create a blueprint to move to where they want to go. We do that once a month. If you go to our website, transformingresults.com, you might want to put that in the show notes, transformingresults.com. You sign up for the workshop, no cost. And if you want to know more after that, certainly we're happy to chat with you. But otherwise, you know, pick up the book. It is written by my mother's favorite author. It's called only because my siblings have never written a book. I'm sure it wouldn't be if they had. But it's called The Four Faces of Frustration. It's available on Amazon. But if you sign up for the workshop, a lot of times we will send out a free copy of the book.
Amazing. We will put all of the ways to contact Andrew and the details to get to those places in our show notes. And again, thank you so much for your time and keep spreading your magic in the world.
Thank you, Laurie. It's been a pleasure.
Andrew, thank you so much for bringing us such powerful insights and practical wisdom to this conversation around frustration and so many other things. We are living in a time where I see all around heightened frustration. So today we have a new lens to look at frustration, not as failure, but as valuable data that can be turned into loyalty, delight, and long term impact. For those of you who want to go deeper with Andrew's work, you can find all of his contact information in the notes. And if today's episode sparked something for you, share it with a fellow leader who could use this message right now. And don't forget to tag us, talk to us. We love to hear what's igniting within you, and share your biggest takeaways with us. Until next time, keep rising into the leader you were born to be: ambitious, awakened, and deeply aligned.